Well, thank you, Garrett, for coming on my show, and I really appreciate
Heck
it,
yeah.
man.
Thanks
Yeah,
for having me on.
we can just jump right in. I was thinking about the time we met each other was in 2019. So 2019, we were both like you've been there, you've been doing like news stuff for a while, but your background was like in entertainment. You were excited about like cultural stuff, movies and that kind of thing. In 2019, pretty good year for movies. Like the Oscars that following year were really fun. Avengers Endgame came out that year, so nerd culture was a very different
Like
thing.
peak.
Yeah, very different than what it is now. But yeah, like how different the like political landscape is from 2019, and like both worlds that you and I kind of lived in. Same with like late night. Late night was hugely different in 2019. It had transitioned a little bit. Like it was all like an anti-Trump fest, but like yeah, like can you like I'd love to hear your thoughts on just your perspective on how much things are different now than in 2019, 2020 when you and I both started doing political stuff in public or like entertainment stuff in public.
Yeah. It is interesting to have the chance to work in kind of media before 2020 because 2020
Yeah,
was 100% like a complete change. Like the world is different. It's like you had
totally.
a similar thing in 2016
Hmm.
when the first election came out. You
Yeah.
could tell in TV shows like the writing changed. The
Mm.
writing went from, oh, we're writing TV shows that have good storylines with characters that have like make sense.
Yeah.
And then everyone all of a sudden just hated conservatives and Trump
Yeah.
and stuff. It was
Right.
just like a weird, and a similar kind of thing happened in 2020. But like before that, we were calling out on the pop culture side all of the wokeness kind of coming in,
Yeah.
and at that point, wokeness was not a key like to people's minds. Like they didn't know about it yet. It
Yeah.
wasn't mainstream.
Hmm.
So we were like calling it out way early. We're going, hey, like what's going on? This is kind of getting weird.
Yeah.
And then 2020 hit, and we thought, okay, some of us thought, I thought, okay, 2020, they're getting rough. They're gonna like pull it back, but they didn't. They went harder in the paint, which was like
Yeah.
the wrong way to go.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah,
it's
dude.
good
Like,
now because you could kind of see them. They're finally learning. Like that stuff is not working. We're kind of being too political. We're seeing a lot of stuff in Marvel kind of like pulling that back, going like,
yeah.
okay, let's try to make it more like for everyone. So
Yeah. But there were like in nerd culture at the time, it was a huge push there. Probably my guess, because it's comics, a lot of it's comics, that's like cheaper to make. And so it's cheaper to like get your ideology into it. But even then, it's now all that like all the anti SJW stuff feels like a luxury. Yeah, where you're like, oh man, like, remember when you had to convince people that there was some kind of media problem?
yeah, and there
Yeah,
was, yeah, like early, like you said, in comics, it really started in the comics industry because so many,
yeah,
and it's like it's part of the arts, and a lot of the arts is taken over by like the left and more like free thinkers and stuff, you
hmm,
know. So
yeah,
it was easily taken over in the comics industry, and then by by them just like copying those stories and fast forwarding in like the MCU, they've gone straight to those stories. Those
yeah,
stories that are all like, you know, race swapped or gender
hmm,
swapped characters that they're trying to
yeah,
start fresh with. And some of them work, like Miles Morales, I think does work,
yeah,
but because they created a real character in the movies. It wasn't just like Peter Parker, but now he's black and Mexican, like or like
right,
whatever it
right,
was. Like
yeah,
he's now actually has his own character traits and stuff,
right,
so that works. But a lot of
yeah,
times it doesn't work.
right.
But yeah,
I can hear Gary in the background just going like, yeah, but he's still
he's
Miles
still
Morales.
Miles
Yeah, yeah,
Morales.
he's
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 not
a separate
a
character.
separate character completely.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a wild thing, kind of watching the industries because I always knew that the movie industry takes years to kind of come around because these projects are 2 3 years in the making,
yeah,
you know, the writing and pre-production and then production and then post-production, right? It takes like 3 years on
hmm,
some of these big projects. So it's not easy for massive corporations to pivot when they feel
right,
like the culture is changing. Like right
yeah,
now, if they had changed last year and had movies coming out that were, and they're kind of almost doing that. Like that's what they tried to do with Deadpool,
Yeah.
is they went, okay, we're not doing any of this stuff that we've been doing in the last phase. And I'm just using Marvel because it's like the biggest one at the
It's
moment.
huge.
But
Yeah.
there's a
Right.
lot of it's kind of like the lost leader. It's that first, it's the canary in the coal mine that goes,
Yeah.
all right, let's pull back. Let's just give them something fun to watch that has
Mhm.
none of this woke politics. And they finished that movie this year. So if that tells
Okay.
you, they're
Yeah.
really trying to fast track that
Sure.
kind of move because they're trying to pivot with the culture.
Yeah.
Because
But
it's
broadly, we're
clear.
getting like, because it's 3 years, we're getting 2021's ideas.
Yeah, we're still getting those.
Yeah, yeah, and like I mean, I remember like when Top Gun Maverick came out, that was a 2019 movie, and so like
Yes.
it was a throwback because it was like, oh, it's a sequel to something from the 80s, and everybody remembers that. But it was also a movie that was packaged and ready in like was supposed to come out in early 2020. And so like people, it still like had the like didn't have the stink on it, and like
Yeah.
could still like get through stuff. But yeah, I guess I remember Doug TenNapel talking about like comics specifically being this kind of thing where he could make a movie by himself, basically, where it was just I don't have to go through committee. I write the script, I do all the scenes, everything. If I think it looks cool, then it goes down, you know. And I love that kind of attitude. But that same thing seems like that can be totally co-opted by anybody who like, because Doug is a good guy and like is doing cool stuff, then you're like, oh, I want that guy to have as much freedom as possible. But yeah, like comics, it makes sense that they would go there first because it has a quicker turnaround time, and so like, but also the audience itself catches that. I haven't seen the new the Deadpool. I haven't seen any of the Deadpool movies, but I'm curious about like the Deadpool movies themselves are like postmodern deconstructions of the superhero genre. So like, but you have so like that only could happen after a bunch of serious ones. So that like serious ones gave it something to make fun of,
Right.
and then now
Well,
it's
like Airplane, like you need
Yeah,
that. You
yeah.
need the previous
100%.
disaster movies on an airplane for Airplane to work.
Right.
So it's the exact same kind of thing.
Yes, and so like you have Deadpool like undermining the previous movies, and then now like Deadpool 3 with Wolverine undermining the bad ones and almost like trying to resurrect the old ones that people love. Like people love those Hugh Jackman X-Men movies. It's such a strange like if you're Marvel and you're sitting there trying to figure out what's the next step, it's tough to build. I think Gary made a similar point in the recent video that you worked on, like that it's tough to build on the thing that's deconstructing the old stuff.
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
like it seems like it could be if you're again the company, you're thinking like, is this movie just here to like take out the trash? Like we're taking out the trash from the last few years, and then you kind of got to do something else. Like that, what else do you do?
Yeah.
It seems like they're in like sure they were in an awkward situation before, but that was when they weren't acknowledging it. But now it's almost like they've got like they've torn down their bad efforts and also like reminded people of, oh, this was really fun. But even like at that point, does it still undermine the Deadpool movies too? Because if Deadpool is like making fun of, I'm talking a lot. Sorry, I'm just catching up with my friend.
You're right.
But like if Deadpool is the first ones were undermining the Fox movies, and then now has like a nostalgia for them as like a sweet thing, or like remember back when Bryan Singer was in charge, you know, the great Bryan Singer.
Forget about that. Forget about that.
No, not Bryan Singer.
Think about the movies. The movies.
Yeah, exactly. Hugh Jackman was.
Yeah.
Remember you all the positive things. Green Day, best days of our lives, whatever. But yeah, like the only way forward, I guess, is like if they actually do have a boom now. Otherwise, they just ripped everything.
Yeah.
Like the third, like making your revival a like, it's almost like Deadpool, like parody and satire of the genre is like this sort of almost like a chemo kind of thing where it's like it kills stuff and then, but if it goes too far, then it starts killing everything.
Yeah.
And so like the treatment I don't know if they can like it's left the
Bounce
host
back from
weaker. Yeah, it's like you've left the body weaker now. But yeah, like do you think it's possible that anybody could come forward now with like a new version of Iron Man that the whole country goes like, yes, that's the one. Strange that I bring that one up.
No, that's
Yeah.
the thing is, so yeah, they're bringing back Iron Man, the actor Robert
Right.
Downey Jr. It's not Iron Man or Tony Stark, but it is the
Right.
same actor. So it's they're
Right.
and the same directors that directed the massive Avengers movie. So they're
Oh,
it's
okay.
clear
I
that
didn't know
they're
that.
desperate.
Okay.
Yeah, they just announced that at Comic-Con. They're bringing back the Russos. So
Yeah.
both the directors that
I
did
did,
like
yeah.
the very successful Avengers movies, they're bringing back Robert Downey Jr. to play Doctor Doom.
Right.
So they're trying to recapture that. And I think you
Right.
kind of hit on it a little bit on in this movie, there's some complaints. I thought it was a fun movie. It's not very deep. It's not a very
Okay.
in-depth story.
Sure. Yeah.
It does make fun of kind of the tropes of superheroes and the tropes of like the multiverse and all that stuff, but it doesn't go really that hard in the paint for it.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, to go back to the plane analogy, if
Yeah.
if Airplane was half a movie making fun of the genre of disaster movies, but also half an earnest take at trying to be a disaster movie.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it goes like, hey guys,
Yeah.
it's kind of silly. We're doing all these multiverse movies and they don't work.
Yeah.
And then they go and do that,
Yeah.
you know? So like you could
Yeah.
tell that there's a little bit of a disconnect between the first two Deadpools, because the first two Deadpools are like very different. They've got a whole lot more heart in them.
Okay.
Like the character of Deadpool is like a lot more fleshed out, and this is kind of like almost a corporate version of it. There's like arguments to be made there that it feels.
I want to hear
very,
those. Like
very
what
different.
in what way? I'm okay
Well,
with spoilers, so we can talk about it.
Oh, well, just for an example, in the first two Deadpool movies, the opening credits, you know, when you'd normally see directed by blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
screen written by blah, 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 right? They're all jokes. It's all like
Okay.
making fun of the situation that Deadpool's in or whatever.
Okay.
Well, in this
Yeah.
one, it's straight exactly what any other Marvel movie would be. It's directed by blah, blah, starring. It's very like,
Yeah, if I
we're not
remember right, it
allowed
was
to
like
come out of the
Yeah.
box and have fun.
if I remember right, it was like something like written by somebody's nephew or something. It was like
Yeah.
jokes about like, oh, we all know what we're doing here.
Yeah, the second one was like his girlfriend dies like right in the opening, like the cold open of the movie, and he goes,
Okay.
directed by, oh wait, did they just kill her? Oh, that was everyone's favorite character. Like it was making fun of it.
Okay.
And in this
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
it felt a little more restrained, and the jokes didn't
Yeah.
go as hard as they could go. So they were trying to straddle that line of,
Yeah.
we're still trying to build off of this movie to make our next
Yeah.
phase, but we're trying
Totally.
to stay irreverent at the same time. So I think it was fun. It was a fun time, but it's, yeah, like you were saying, it's not a great place to jump off of.
Yeah.
Because now they're coming from a place where everyone knows Phase 4 was not very good. Like the writing, you could even take all the woke stuff out. Like as just a quality wise, the movies were not very well made. They weren't well written. The characters were poorly constructed. So now we're going from that. And then we have this movie that everyone is liking. It's over $1 billion at this point.
Right.
Everything's pretty hollow other than like the two main characters. If you didn't have Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman for people to kind of be like, okay, I know those guys and their chemistry is really good, the movie I don't think would work.
Yeah. But like and back to the airplane thing, it's like if the airplane movie not only was like trying to be sincere at some level, but was also like saying, hey, remember when disaster movies were good?
Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
like trying to
And
do
you're
both
like,
of those
well-
things at the same time. That's pretty tough. And like again, Deadpool's already like torn down those guys and made fun of those guys. But like best case scenario, if you're Marvel, they just like reset everything to neutral, so that like they made a bunch of movies people liked, and then they made a bunch of movies people hated, and then they made fun of the movies that people hated. Now what? You know, it's like a total, okay, like best case scenario, everybody is on the same page, like, oh, that wasn't very good. Now we're gonna really show them. But still, because the 3-year thing, they're still having to pull out movies that they started making a long time ago.
They have two shows that are on, they've been on the shelf for 2 years, been completed, edited, finished for 2 years. It's Ironheart, which is the young black girl version of Iron Man.
Okay.
Very Phase 4.
Yeah.
And then Agatha, which is
Right.
a witch from the WandaVision show that came out 2 years ago that
Uh-huh.
nobody, I mean, like, people thought the first half were good, but the second half was not good.
Yeah.
So it's like two shows that they already had and they have to release, but they're
Hmm.
trying to do this repivot
Hmm.
at the same time. So they're kind of
Yeah.
like, they didn't talk about those two shows that are coming out at all at Comic-Con. It was all about the next, they were like, look forward,
Ooh,
guys, like, look forward. Like, here's
man.
Robert Downey Jr., guys. Like,
Yeah.
don't think about the things that we still have coming
Right.
out.
And that worked. Like
It did. It
that's what
totally
everybody
worked.
talked about.
The next thing that's coming out, like movie wise, is Fantastic Four. So
Okay.
they're gonna try and because that Fantastic Four is completely disconnected from any of the MCU connection. It's like a different
Yeah.
timeline. It's still got the multiverse stuff, which is they need to get out of that because it's really convoluted and annoying.
Yeah.
And none of the movies connect. Like they all have their own ways of making a multiverse. It's like some are
Okay.
time and some are different multiverses and some are it's dumb.
Right. Yeah.
So now they're going, okay, this we're in the futuristic 60s and we're doing the Fantastic Four guys. Like we're starting, it's going to be kind of starting from scratch ish.
Hmm.
And that's where they're going to jump off from. So I guess they're going
Okay.
from irreverent, making fun of the multiverse in Deadpool
Right.
to using the multiverse to try and do like I guess another earnest like Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
It just depends on how they play that movie. Like, how is that movie gonna? Is it going to be the Fantastic Four that everyone knows, like
Hmm.
kind of corny, a little
Right.
bit, like bright family action
Yeah.
comic book thing, or are
Mhm.
they going to try and do some kind of we're in the multiverse and everything is convoluted, and
Yeah.
there's Robert Downey Jr. and he's playing, it's like
Well, even
we'll
that,
see.
like they're bringing back because like the deconstruction thing happened, and then they're bringing back their biggest hero that everybody loved as the villain. So they're like now it's like the deconstruction keeps going. Yeah, I, like the corporate problem solving, like those dark rooms where everybody's having like that's the most fascinating place for me. Like the movies themselves are interesting, like they can be fun and they can be cool, but like where those guys sitting around smoking cigars, which might be illegal now. It's probably not.
Oh,
it's
that
probably
would be
not, like,
problematic. You can't
Yeah.
smoke a cigar.
Yeah.
That's not good.
I
That's
picture
misogynistic.
yes, like I still picture when I picture like people making movies, Joe Montana in Three Amigos, where he's just
yeah.
like yelling, like "Get out of here!" But like I know that
Take
that's
the
not
Amigos
the way
clothes.
things. Yeah, I know that's not like
We'd
how
be in a
things are
better
actually
spot
happening now.
if
Yeah,
those guys
dude,
were still
totally.
in charge. Because those
Yeah.
guys, I feel like there's an era in like the 70s and the 80s that were just kind of like, is that what the kids like?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Give it to
And
'em.
now they go, is that what the kids like? And it's non-binary,
Yeah.
Silver Surfer or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's what they're
Right.
doing in Fantastic Four. They're bringing in a non-binary like androgynous. It's like, God, just do the Silver Surfer. That's what people want. Just do what people like.
Right.
Why when
I
they
want a
think
big-
Silver
yeah.
Surfer, that guy,
Big
silver
orange
dude
rock
on a board.
guy. Yeah, big orange rock
Big
guy,
orange rock guy.
with fire. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do the
do that.
stretchy man. Yeah, and it's also poisoned by the fact that there've not been really good Fantastic Four movies in the past. But that was like old fashioned bad movie where you're like, oh, like I'll remember when it was just like not very good.
Yeah,
Like
when it was kind of corny.
Oh, I miss
You could
those
go like,
days.
oh,
when-
that's so bad.
yeah, right.
It seriously,
Yeah.
it makes a lot of people go back and go like, was it
Yeah.
actually that bad?
Yeah.
I don't know because
Yeah.
like now we're watching this and this is bad.
Yeah, you
don't
totally
know,
get
that
that
could be
effect with
good.
like with the Star Wars prequels. Like I'm still on the bandwagon that they're not great movies, but
Well,
like
I love them, but they're not great
yeah,
movies.
well, sure, yeah. Like I have a personal like I remember like watching those movies with like a lot of affection, but like you can at some level go, well, it was lightsabers when I was a kid. Like that's what lightsabers were, and it was like that was how cool that stuff was in my mind. Yeah, I like the David Mamet talked about the when he was doing movies originally that he would just go in and there was like two Jewish guys behind a desk and he could just like pitch the movie and then they would go like, how much will it cost? It'd be like 4 million. They'd be like, yeah, we can do that.
I love that.
Where it's just like
I
where
wish
it's
you
just
go
like,
back to that.
oh, it's like small gamble, sure, whatever. Like we'll try it out. It'll get us, if not like a ton of money, it'll still give us like some cool points for having the new David Mamet movie. And that binary of like artists, like corporate guys can be like motivated by money for sure, and also like social clout. Like, oh, you got the new whatever movie, and it doesn't have to be that made bazillions of dollars, but like, hey, can you believe they got the new Coppola movie?
Right.
Like, oh,
It's got all these
the studio. Yeah.
accolades.
Yes.
It came from Sundance or yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah, and it won an award, but it's not like, oh, it didn't make a ton of money, but like we got the Oscar, or we got nominated for 4 Oscars. But like I was listening to a guy. Are you familiar with Lomez on Twitter?
No.
You'd like Lomez. His real name's Jonathan Keeperman. But I went to NatCon, the National Conservatism Conference, and he spoke about how like that's the same thing. If we're trying to do like dissident art or like something that's not in the mainstream, that like you have to have both of those motivators, not just the money making one. Because a lot of times, like in conservative world, we want because people are political conservatives, they want to make their money back. But like the social clout piece is huge. And right now, all the social clout is patting people on the back for being woke. But like if you can at some level like appeal to the, hey, like this is the guy who did this X, Y, and Z, you may lose money on this, but man, it's worth that chance because you're like 10 times cooler because you have that guy's book now, or you have. But like it's such a strange time to be like in the arts and all that kind of stuff, because when you and I grew up, there were these like huge behemoths that had been built up over decades, right? And
far before we were even born.
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah. And so like I talk about Saturday Night Live all the time, but like Saturday Night Live existed because there was an empty studio and an empty time slot. And like the fact that there is such a thing as Studio 8H is not Saturday night. Like Lorne Michaels didn't have to build the studio. Yeah. And he didn't have to ask anybody around, but it was just this kind of thing that existed that he could plug into and then make it make sense. But like when people talk about like, oh, I want to do the right-wing Saturday Night Live, or I want to do the non-woke Saturday Night Live, or whatever, people always forget that infrastructure piece. And like that, it totally, so like, this is why I think what you guys are doing at Normal World is really cool, because the infrastructure was something that you guys like were able to get into. And like the infrastructure itself is like still taking shape because it's a young company and it's figuring out what it is and how to incorporate all these different kinds of things. But I really like how you guys are able to take the infrastructure that's been built, sometimes for something that was built for something different, right? It's built for podcasting, it's built for news, straight news, and not like hang podcasts with like a huge sketch element. Right. But I think you guys are doing that just about as well as anybody, mainly because people forget that infrastructure piece when they're trying to plan ahead. But yeah, like are you guys off this week doing shows?
We're off this week. There's a secret event that Dave is doing that people will find out about later. But we're off this week, but we're still airing some stuff.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I still listen all the time. The recent I think it's really rare to find the kind of show that would do something like the 15 minutes y'all did on wax figures.
Just random stuff. Sometimes I'm thinking, dude, like, does anybody care about this? I don't know, but I think it's funny.
It's super funny. It was a great clip, and having like basically a panel of people where it's just like, and here's the picture, and then just everybody jumps in with their jokes. Yeah, that's super fun. It's I think not a weakness, but at least like a blind spot for some people in the right wing sphere, or like in conservative, or like just non-woke or non-liberal, that like having fun is really like an attractive and like
is a thing that people like to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like even like we did I did an interview, and this wasn't like a goofy thing that I did, but it was I interviewed a guy from South Africa, because I was just like, we were talking at NatCon, and I was just like, dude, you're like, everything he was saying was super interesting to me. Like we were sitting in the bar, like waiting for some talk to start. And I was like, can we just do like a podcast right now? So anyway, I was super interested. I was excited about it, but I thought like, oh, nobody's going to care. Like this is not like, especially I was posting it at Canon, and I love the Canon audience, but like, and I was like, that's not what they came to Canon for.
Right. Yeah.
But when I posted it, people loved it. Like people flock to that video, and like I think it's really, it can be surprising to find out like, oh, these are like and because it's like our brains don't work in such a way to like remember that people have multiple interests, and like there are huge pieces of people that aren't necessarily even just like. Because you like when you're talking about like movies, when you're talking about stuff, you don't just want to be talking about whether it's woke or not.
Yeah, because that gets boring. That's like
absolutely
it's very shallow.
Yeah, and like at some level, I miss the discourse, not just because the discourse of like, oh, that's just a bad movie, and now I get to talk about like, this character arc doesn't make any sense at all, or like this one doesn't have a character, have an arc at all. But like it makes me like go back and watch old movies. Not just because a lot of times they're better, but when they're bad, the complaints are more fun to talk about.
Yeah,
like
that's why you find
like
that a lot on
structural
YouTube.
complaints. Yeah,
Yeah, you want to really break down. There's these great guys. They do a podcast called EFAP's Every Frame a Pause. Well, they'll go through stuff and literally pause it and be like, there's a panel of them, and they'll stop and they'll talk about they'll deconstruct why everything is bad. Mahler is a good friend of our show, Friday Night Tights, and he does like 6 hour long videos sometimes, and people go like, why are you spending 6 hours long, like 6 hours breaking down this movie you don't like? And so, well, because there's a lot of things that are wrong, and it's a good thing to deep dive into that and go like, why is it wrong? Not just, I don't like that, oh, it's dumb. Like, it's not good because character is important, and the way you construct a story is important, how these things like setup, payoff, all this stuff. So yeah, it's really great to do that kind of thing in different mediums.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't get done.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, 100%. And like, I think some people think that if you're not making your own movies, that you're not doing anything important. So like some people will be like, hey, what movies have you made? What like if you're in the criticism world, but it's like, that's part of the world. Like you're creating and trying to like chastise people for being bad. And hopefully that has its own kind of work. Is there anybody right now that is doing like really exciting, cool stuff? Because it's cheaper to make comics, but like there are movies and TV shows, and like I love the criticism world. Like I love hanging out there and like figuring that out. Is there anybody that like, if you hear, oh, that guy wrote a new book or that guy made a new movie, that you're just like, I'm going for sure?
Brandon Sanderson is a writer that I really enjoy. He's a prolific writer. He's writing books, like 5 books a year sometimes. During the pandemic, he actually wrote, I think it's like 6 books during the like 2020 and 2021, and didn't tell anybody. Didn't tell his publisher, he was just writing books. And then he did a Kickstarter after the fact, and it was like record-breaking Kickstarter. But he's working on some projects, turning some of his books into movies. So I'm really excited about that aspect, like where he's going to go with that, because he's got a really cool book series. And it's all kind of connected. It's really cool.
And he's doing the like traditional publishing route and also the Kickstarter thing, which I think
he's
is
doing both.
Like, extremely smart, because if at some point the publisher thing doesn't work out, he's got this model that's worked. Like, hey man, I know how to sell books.
That's what's really exciting about like the future and how the internet works, and you can be a person, just a random person, if you're good enough. And Brandon obviously went through the publisher route and then built up an audience. There's an aspect of that is like building up an audience in some way. But like if you're an interesting person and if you write really great stuff, you can get your stuff made. You can get whatever project made. That's exciting right now. Like a friend of mine, Eric July, he's like on his 4th campaign. Every single one's over 1 million, because he built up that audience of people on YouTube that respected his opinion about comic books or about politics or whatever. And then he was like, hey, well, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and make something and see if you guys like it. And people did. So like, that's really exciting to me is seeing all the individual people that don't have to go through that system and that can make whatever they want.
Yeah. Some folks some folks will think that if, just because somebody is criticizing that they can't actually do it. But like July is one of those guys where, hey, people love his stuff, and it's like a huge support for him. But it's also like, I want to hear these stories again, which is, and then like the political alignment is just one piece of why people like flock to this stuff. You know, it's like that's why people trust him. But it's also like because they trust him on the story element as well. Like he goes, this was a story problem. I'm going to solve that. I'm going to try to
And he
build
hired
something.
people. He hired
Yeah.
people that are
Okay.
like professionals, like Chuck Dixon, and
Yeah.
people that are like well-renowned comic book writers that know story, that know characters. And he was like,
Right.
okay, he's going to be like, I'm not just going to try and write it myself just because I think I can. Like, I know people that can, and I'm going to go
Mhm.
hire them. Like, that's what Marvel does. You think every
Right.
single person in the Marvel staff knew Spider-Man through and through? Maybe in the
Yeah.
early days because like
Right.
Stan Lee helped create him, but he
Hmm.
wasn't there every single day writing every single word. He was the editor. He was going, okay, that works, that doesn't work. Let's try that. Oh, that's a good idea. Like
Yeah.
he's that kind of guy. And we need more of
Yeah.
those people.
Totally. And like the we'll finish. I know I'll let you move on, but
Okay.
it's so interesting to me that like back in the day, but like when we were growing up, it's not that long ago, but like there was a time where like you could be a specialist in the arts and again like become a part of, oh, I'm at NBC, I just know how to edit something really well. And
Yeah.
I'm a knife and I'm sharp and I know exactly, like I'm small but I'm sharp and I can do this thing and kill it. And then NBC has the money to hire 100 of those and just go like, all right, you guys work on that. And then we're now in a time where like Eric July, as well as being an editor, has opinions about everything, but he also has to be the businessman
Right.
and the face of the company. And I think that's like right now is the time where if when we were growing up, it was the time for like specialists. Now is the time like where generalists are really kind of having a big day.
Yeah.
So that then maybe we can build something later where like maybe our grandkids can be like specialized and
Yeah, it
like
can,
as
like, come back
specialized as it
around.
used to be. Yeah, because like we got to build the roads, we got to like plant the trees, and let other
Exactly, yeah.
people like sit under those. But yeah, man, I love like I said many times in this talk, I love what you guys are doing at Normal World because I think it's one of those pieces of that in the sense that it's like you guys all love sketch comedy. Everybody there like loves making sketch comedy, and you also recognize like you love doing podcasts. Like Dave has a huge radio background, and so like you both love both of those things, and being able to like marry those two things in a way that makes sense now when you don't have, I mean, like Blaze is wonderful and amazing. It's not NBC in the 70s.
Yeah.
So it's not this huge machine where everybody can be extremely specialized. But like, I think that what you guys are doing there and like the is part of that building process that like the next guys who come in will have something that they wouldn't have had if you guys weren't doing that. Like being kind of in an awkward position of like, hey, let's try this out. What if we did this? And so I think like the infrastructure you guys are building and the like little challenges that you guys are facing with like what, how much of it's sketch, how much of it's podcast, is like such an important part. And like people will be grateful to you guys, for doing that work.
Hopefully.
So yeah, yeah, exactly.
Hopefully we're doing something.
Yeah, you want a bronze statue outside of Blaze
Yeah.
TV. Yeah,
Right in the
see,
front, like where
Yeah.
that driveway is. I want to be right there in the middle.
Absolutely. I'll make some calls. Some
Okay.
calls. You get a bronze statue.
Appreciate
Well,
it.
thank you, Garrett, for coming on my show and just chatting about whatever popped into my head. I really
Heck yeah.
appreciate it, man.
Thanks
Yeah.
for having me on. It's fun.